Everybody, thanks for stopping in. I'm looking forward to this conversation with Wayne. Wayne, thanks for joining me. Say hey to everybody here.
Thanks for having me, Drew. I'm happy to be here. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, you're a man about town. What you were in Florida doing a talk about AI?
Yeah, I got back from Florida last night. I spoke to that group about just demystifying ChatGPT and trying to make it a little more approachable to folks. And we're going to touch on that a little later today. So it's perfect timing.
Delving into the navigation and the demystifying and all the. You live in AI long enough and you start to pick out some of the words and getting into the most compelling messaging and the most compelling content. There is a certain amount of doing that you have to, we're going to get you going with some tips for 2025 strategy, but there is an investment of time and headspace and creative energy that goes into getting better at this. And I'll share a fail story of my own that I hope makes this process less scary. But we're gonna cover. Let's just get into it. Why is content important? Why is content marketing important? Just in a B2B setting or a B2C setting.
Yeah, it's crazy. For those of you that I haven't met before, don't know me previously, before I started Bowe Digital, I used to work for the American Land Title Association, and one of the big projects that I worked on while I was there was the homeowner outreach program, and we were focused on providing tools to better explain the industry to folks, especially the end consumer, buyers and sellers, and people thought we were kind of crazy at the time, but these days, there are a lot more agents, whether it's you at this point today or not, that are focused on actually marketing to buyers and sellers. There are a lot more doing that than ever before. And so whether it's, like you were saying, Drew, B2B, B2C, if you're not familiar with those phrases, business to business is what we all do to our realtor, lender, investor customers versus B2C, which is business to consumer. Everybody is consuming content at a rate that is unfathomable in a lot of ways for a lot of folks. And so it's really important to create content that people want to read, which is a struggle in this industry. And I know it's what we're going to really get into today in a lot of different ways, but it's important because it's the easiest way to make you relatable to your current customers, to keep them engaged, but also to identify new folks and in new audiences that you can go after for future business from them. And whether that's content can mean a little bit of everything. The phrase that pays in marketing is just that content is king, and that can be anything. It could be website content, social media, video. There's a lot of different stuff there, and you just have to get started. But it's extremely important to be thinking about what that looks like for your organization.
I'm glad you mentioned that content isn't exclusively about social media posts and quirky, quippy graphics. And I mean, it's 2024. Social media, it's like the 90s rock era of music is my favorite genre, but you mention the word grunge to any of those musicians, they're like, it's the Seattle sound, it's not grunge. So social media is coined social media, but it's really just media at this point. It's the norm. So websites, email communication, social media, print media, all that stuff. But some of the challenges that we all have is, in title specifically, how do you attribute it to revenue? How do you measure it? Why is creating content so difficult? And why is it so difficult in title real estate?
Man, those are loaded questions. I say all the time, we get people that come to us and say, we really want to get started on Facebook. And I say, why? Like, what's the purpose? Why do you feel like you need to be active on social? Because if the answer is that you want revenue to increase this month or this quarter even, social is probably not where you should start creating content. But content is, that's my initial reaction when you said, how do you tie it to revenue, or how do you validate the time and money that you spend on creating content? And it's hard because a lot of title companies for a long time just didn't operate like other forms of business that would put a premium on marketing and understand marketing in a way to know that marketing is a way to help to increase awareness on what you're doing and to enhance relationships that you have. I was doing a webinar once with Dr. Cindy McGovern, and between us both kind of talking about it on stage together, we said that, in a lot of ways, marketing is the online dating and sales is the actual relationship. And so if you think about it that way, like, sometimes you have to go through and you have to spend the time swiping, and you have to spend the time figuring out what's good and bad and what works and doesn't and what's going to make somebody be interested. And then from beyond that is where you actually make the money. And so it's hard for title companies because a lot of them don't want to spend the time or the money to create content. It's also hard, I think, the number one thing that I hear is we just don't know what to say, or what we have to say isn't interesting enough to people. And I would challenge that in a lot of different ways, and we'll get into that more later when we talk about actual content ideas and stuff. But for anybody that is, I call them lurkers. If you're a lurker on TikTok, where you're on there but you're not creating content yourself, you're just watching everybody else, that there are really weird accounts that get tens of millions of views. And one of those, and if you're on there, there are videos of these farmers that have cows in their field that have infected hooves, and people always are like, what are you talking about? I promise, if you're on TikTok, you've seen one of these gross cow hoof videos. And my point to the title industry is that if infected, gross cow hooves can get views, people want your content too. So we're consuming things, like Drew said, we're consuming media at all stages of our life at this point, regardless of whether it's social or not. It doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to be thinking about it as like, how do I make the most original content on the planet, or how do I totally create this original thought or idea, because you can use a lot of what's already out there in the industry to do so. But if you're sitting there thinking like, nobody really cares about what we do, we're on the back end of the transaction, that sort of thing, just keep in mind that there's a lot of stuff out there getting lots of attention, and there's no reason that your company can't be one of those people.
For sure. I think title, some of the challenges with title, as I researched what I put out for security title, I think I keep coming back to this giant no man's land. One trench is simple, palatable content that is in line with modern consumption, and then you have the necessarily complicated title subject matter. And if someone wants to steal my idea and turn it into a graphic, I would love to. I don't even have TikTok, but like if I had TikTok, I'd create some GIF of McFly from Back to the Future where he's talking to Lorraine in the diner or restaurant, and he's like, I'm your density. That's title insurance to me. But you have this like 0 to 100 concept, and all this real estate in between. I think there's a tangibility problem. I think there's a certain malaise about, well, it just comes down to relationships, and it comes down to going to events, and it comes down to seeing people. And how do you create that tangibility? The content pillars outside of AI and the property fraud that's been put to the forefront, with the content pillars having not really changed much in 150 years, without there being like an actual product aside from the policy itself. What is it? People do business with you for a reason. Is it because of your people? What are the topics and what are the concepts that people don't realize are a good foundation to get started with content ideation?
Yeah. I, like I said, I think a lot of people stumble because they'll start creating content. It's easiest to create content on what you know. So we'll do a lot of, like you were saying, the really heavy, this is title down in the weeds, like let's do some terms and definitions and things like that, or let's explain a really quirky part of the process or a really unique part of the title search or something like that. And that's all good and well, and some of your customers may enjoy that, but that's likely going over the head of a lot of your folks. And so there's one piece of it, like you said, Drew, of creating content that explains what you do. But in a lot of our surveys, most of the time, the realtors, the lenders, the investors, they're not necessarily as concerned about what you do specifically, but how it benefits them. So if you can think about, like, here's a quirky part of the title search, because we know this or because we've handled this before, it can benefit you in these types of transactions, or because we know more about right of way than anybody else in the state, we're your go-to for government contracts or municipalities or things like that. Figuring out how to change it from being a magnifying glass or a megaphone about here's what we do and know, but tilting it just a couple of degrees to say, but this is how it benefits you more specifically, can be super helpful. And then, I mean, the biggest differentiator for most teams is your team. And that's hard for a lot of title companies because they don't want to, everybody's worried about poaching, we're all worried that someone's going to take somebody else, but it's happening regardless. So
Right.
I tell people, like, don't be afraid of it, of putting your team out there, because in a lot of ways it's better solidifying because you're not operating in the shadows. You're out there promoting these folks and showing who they are and who they're with, and it can be a way to create some morale and some glue in your own company. But even if you're not identifying specific people, talking more specifically about, like, your escrow officers, your closing department, your real estate attorneys, and not the experience they have. Like, we saw one company once that said, our real estate attorneys have over 1,000 years of experience in the business. And I just shook my head because I was like, that's just so, I understand it and I can appreciate it. And that's great that everybody's been in their role for 40 years and, do the math to figure out what that equals to how many of the attorneys are there to equal 1,000 years. But I was just like, what does that ultimately,
Right.
versus one attorney somewhere that has 40 years of experience? It's not something to necessarily lean your hat on, but to better explain, like, why those specific people are making a difference for your customers and what they know or do, again, can be really helpful. And then the last thing that I would say in terms of, like, creating your content is, a lot of people waste a lot of time, like I said before, trying to think of those really unique ideas. Like, how do we make, like, I have sat in on many a panel of people saying, like, how to make title insurance fun, how to make title insurance sexy, how to make it, XYZ. Your underwriters, like Drew here, are creating content all the time that you can use and borrow. Your technology providers and your other vendors, your software companies, all are putting out ebooks and video and blog posts and all kinds of stuff that you can take and say, like, hey, we saw this the other day. This is why we use this company. This is how it benefits you. Or you might have seen our out of office last week. We were at a user group for this event, or we were at security title training, and this is what we learned to bring back to help your business. And don't think of it as, like, I always have to come up with something super original. Figure out how to use so much of what else is already happening and just amplify that. And that'll make it way less maddening usually when you start thinking about your content.
Yeah, you have to think about what actually matters to your customer. And I'll pose this to the group. If you want to raise your hand, if you've heard any of these, like, big conceptual buzzwords like, buyer's journey, raise your hand if you've, in the chat, if you've heard any type of planning strategy that is like, okay, cool, buyer journey. Like, I know how to run a business. Like, why do I need to know customer personas and buyers journeys? And, like, what does that even freaking matter in the grand scheme of things when, yeah, so, but the reason, Wayne, I'm going to pose the question to you about why that matters, but in an industry where it's almost like you have a ruler, 12-inch ruler, and maybe there's some head trash around it, but it feels like Title has a ruler with all the numbers yanked off of it. And it's either you put some material out there and you either get a call or you don't get a call, or you get the order and you don't get an order. Why is a buyer journey in Title important?
Yeah, in some ways, it's because we don't, a buyer journey, if you're not familiar with that, if you weren't somebody that raised your hand, it's just thinking about like the process that somebody that would potentially use your business, your service, your product goes through before making a purchase. And then you've probably heard of customer journeys, that's more of like the ongoing process for folks of not only how it happens during the purchase, but everything they interact with you afterwards. And especially for Title, we just don't focus on those pre-purchase, pre-use stages because, like Drew was saying, everybody says, well, we've got the business is based on relationships and all of that, and that's true. But I think a misstep of the industry is that I talk a lot about how we're always waiting for that favor moment. And I think that's a huge problem for a lot of agents and attorneys is that we wait for that favor. We've got this relationship with this one realtor, and if they just gave us one piece of business, that would change everything. And so they do. One day they have an emergency. They're like, hey, so-and-so can't close this. Can you guys do it with security title? And they'll run their team ragged and turn everything up on end, and they'll figure out how to get it closed. And then nothing happens after that. Everything they hoped for, like we're waiting for the favor. And if we do the favor, if we make it happen, then this deal will go through. And that's usually not the case. And some of you are probably smiling at this thinking, yeah, you're right. We do run around with our hair on fire and then it's not returned to us. And that's where thinking about your buyer journey and like what people go through to get to you can be helpful because you don't have to wait for those favor moments. You can be putting content there to explain to them why they should be using you and go after people that you're not currently waiting for the favor for, that you don't always consider them as somebody that might be able to give you business. I try to coach our folks all the time for that whole buyer journey side of it, to think of 5 realtors or 5 investors or 3 brokerages that you want to get business from this year. And if any of them have been on your list for 5 years or more and you still haven't gotten business, take them off the list. Like, let's think of new and different. And then what specifically do those folks need, want, or care about? And that can then help inform how you want to talk about that journey through your organization and what your differentiation might be for each one of those groups.
Yeah, for sure. The 1,000-year stat that you said, that resonates with me and us because, I mean, one of our big points, we've been in business 72 years, and if I go down the negative, what's the negative feedback going to be if I create something around this? I'm sure a lot of people in my shoes would be like, all right, people are just going to think you're old. Who cares? 1,000 years, 72 years, who cares? What's it mean? What have you done? One of the things I started doing and it's tough to wrangle legal experts who are the subject matter experts. We're not writing a health food blog here making juice. Like we're selling legal advice and expertise, and started scheduling some recurring meetings with the subject matter experts. And you'd be surprised who has written newsletters, blogs, anything like that. You'd be surprised who has done that in the past, who simply hasn't been asked to do anything like that recently.
Yep.
And if you happen to get these meetings schedule them on Teams or schedule them on any program that can record and transcribe the call, and then you download the text, and you have all the nuggets of information there. And one of the cool things that comes out of those calls is people get tired of talking in technical explanations of things, and it will get to a point where that person will, here's what it really means. And that's the good nugget. That's the great stuff there, is when people get tired of reciting their dictionary, their internal dictionary, and that's when you get to the content that is relatable, because they've said it a million times and they have to figure out new ways to say it. They might come around to it accidentally, but yeah. Moving on. What is differentiation? What is it not? When people go to craft their messages, how do you get people out of the we, us, feature, and then direct them more toward customer issue conversations?
I mean, I think the easiest way to do that to start is go to whoever answers your phone or sits in your front office and say, what are the 3 most annoying questions you get asked? Those are content points that you can start using immediately, because they'll have an answer. And sometimes it's hard for them to pick the top 3 most annoying questions. But if they're getting those questions, it's because we're not communicating, educating, marketing, like however you want to look at it. We're not explaining that stuff well enough. People still don't get it, or there's a quirky piece of your website that you have to explain all the time, or whatever that is. But trying to think about how to move from talking about what we do, doing Title Tip Tuesday, all of that kind of stuff, versus like you were just saying, I can't remember how you just worded it specifically, but like more about like what the customer actually cares about, is to go through that kind of stuff. But then also, like, we've challenged some of our customers to, on a busy Friday of closings, have somebody sit in your front office, and every time one of your customers says, this was great, thank you guys again, we loved this so much, it should be embedded in the culture of your organization that somebody pulls out a phone and says, hey, can I get you on camera saying that? Because even if you only get 2 out of 10 people, which you will get more than that, I promise, more than 2 will say yes, you can ask them more questions, because once they're on camera, then you can say things like, what specifically do you like using us for? Like, thanks for saying that our closing was great, but what was great about it? And then whatever their answers are, those folks that are willing to say it in the moment, shot it from the rooftops, that sort of thing, that can then inform everything else that you want to do to also be shotting it from the rooftops and get other people to experience what your bedrock customers already know are so great about you.
Yeah, you don't have to look too far.
Yep.
If there's a story that I don't know how many, long enough ago, but I still cringe about it, where I look at the National Day calendar and it's, I don't know why, it's just International Chess Day, just sitting right there. It's like, something about the importance of chess pieces, and it got to be this convoluted thing where it's like, okay, I finally tied it back to like checkmate, or I'm sharing this with you all because it was a total fail, and it's one of those things that everyone's forgotten about it, but there's that fear that I'm going to put out something stupid and everyone's going to hate me and I'm going to hate myself and I'm never going to do content marketing ever again. But
right.
I mean, the process is there to find ways to tie it back to title, or tie it back to your organization. But your prospects want outcomes. Your prospects don't want features. If you demonstrate that you understand the outcome that they want and have the ability or the track record to help them achieve that outcome, then they'll care about the features. We don't need to get into funnel position and all of that, but yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we move on related to getting people out of that the French lesson, as Dave Conway actually told me about it, the we part of content marketing.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much else to add other than like just don't be. I mean, the best part about marketing in 2024, soon to be 2025, is that there's a huge chance that what you're going to do doesn't move the needle. So you shouldn't be afraid to try new and different things, because unless you're doing something really crazy or offensive, it's not going to hurt your business for sure. But the first time you try it, it's probably not going to bring you new business either. So you might as well try it. So for a lot of title companies, that's on the con side. For me as a marketer, that's on the pro side, that you're sort of like at a net neutral for trying new ideas and thinking about content differently. And if you want to get your team out of that funk, I mean, I say this all the time, go buy one of those writing prompt books that you would use in college. We do this exercise with a lot of our customers where I'm trying to get them out of their email, out of the way they normally do things. I would say, like, if our customers were dinosaurs or pirates, how would we talk about what we do? And immediately your brain is forced to start thinking about it in a very different way than we normally would. Like pirates, you're going to talk about how you're swashbuckling seller impersonation fraud, and you're making wire fraudsters walk the plank, and you're sailing the seas of complicated transactions and all this stuff. Ways that we would never talk about our business, and probably things you would never actually post or create video on, but it makes you think differently. And even at a small scale, my example is always, if you were going to talk about what makes your business different in a fortune cookie, what would you say? And immediately you have to change whatever your mission statement is, your tagline or whatever. In a fortune cookie, you know that you only got so much space, and you've got to be a little witty or wise in what you're doing. And so it forces you to just think a little bit differently. So you've got to, it's like everything else, it's a muscle you've got to build, and you've got to work with that on your team, whether it's you as the one person in charge of marketing, maybe you've got a department, or you have an outsourced company like us or someone else. Like, you've got to go through that to get out of that mindset, because it's not something in title that we're used to. So you have to take the time to make that happen.
There are two last things that I want to touch on. We're going to get into an interactive part here. We're actually going to try to show you how to create a schedule and research some content pillars. But we talked about content IP a little bit, and that goes along with like being totally in the problems of your customers. So if no one's ever heard of it, content IP, content intellectual property, it's essentially giving a name to the problem that your customers are experiencing, or giving a name to just any problem. So you quiet quitting, or the Great Resignation, or insert other name that someone in the media has coined to describe a problem. And I'm not super good at it because I haven't really gotten into it too far, so that'll be some homework for me and something ongoing for me. But for people who aren't creative with names, are we going to get into ChatGPT or thesaurus.com, or how do you go through a process of getting better creatively, or going through drafts of names and giving names to things?
Yeah, I think that is an instance where ChatGPT can be super helpful. You just have to know how to create the prompt, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit too later if we want to. But I think that don't just go run with the first thing that you come up with. Sometimes it is the best. Sometimes it is the best idea that you have. But to me, it's where you doing some of those exercises, or old school methodologies of like getting our hands moving while we're learning and talking about things. So often, especially for brainstorming, and this is what I talked about just yesterday, was that it worries me a lot that when we're doing this brainstorming type stuff, we're trying to be creative these days, for a lot of people, their first instinct is, let me run this through ChatGPT. Or if you're on Canva and you're using their magic tools for all their AI stuff, and you're like, well, let me run it through there. Challenge yourself to still think about it. I'm elder millennial enough that it worries me that we are so tech centric on our brainstorming and creativity now, because it can be a tool for you, but it's not the solution. So you still have to think about some of that up front about what you want and all that. But I think doing those exercises, like we use, anybody that's ever gone to trainings and stuff with us, we do a lot of Play-Doh exercises where we put Play-Doh in people's hands and get them moving, and so they're not on their phones, they're not on keyboards and everything like they are all day long, to try to think about that stuff differently. And I think we do a lot of surveys to our customers, or surveys about things like that, but they're all electronic. They're all quick things through email, and it's when people's attention is super divided. And sometimes that's stuff where like you need to actually have a conversation with somebody. And so if you're trying to gut check some of those ideas, asking somebody to spend 5 minutes on the phone with you, or 5 minutes on a quick Zoom call or something, you can get way more out of that than what you can try to infer by what they answer in the moment on a survey. Because they could be in their car running late to a meeting and they answer it really quick. They could have just gotten off the phone fighting with their spouse and then they answer it. Like, you never know like what state of mind they were in when they answer something like that, when you're thinking about big things that can make a difference for you, like the creation of some of that stuff.
What data matters to you? I mean, data is a big old question. Platforms have, whether you're talking Google Analytics or even the dashboards of LinkedIn, or survey data. What's some of the most important data that people can collect to give them an indication of where a potential transaction is trending?
Yeah, there are a couple of different things that I would advise here. Data is different for everybody. Every company is different, but also the market that you're in, the type of business that you do, the data that matters for you for like social media for a solely commercial operation will be different than people that are doing emails to residential realtors in a metro area. So like you have to think about you have to know internally what's most important to you. But a couple of things to know: a lot of companies try to market you or tell you that impressions are really important, and I would caution people to know that for us, I mean, what we tell our customers, impressions are an empty number, because impressions are essentially anyone that has seen your content, whether that's an email, an ad, whatever it is, on any platform at any point. And that just means that by seeing it, that just means that it's appeared on the screen while they were on the screen.
For like 5 seconds.
Anything with it. Yeah, I mean, we are all impressions for thousands of ads that you don't even know about every single day, just because you've been moving right on past it. So don't let anything guide you by impressions. I think that for social, for a lot of title companies, if you're really worried about the engagement side of things in terms of likes and comments, a lot of title companies just don't get much of that. That's not what the realtors are doing, or the lenders, or those folks. I think that where we see the most data that's useful is to look at who's sharing the content, because a lot of what you're doing as a title agent especially is sharing content for realtors and investors that might be useful to their customers. And so you want to create stuff that they're like, yes, I agree with this, or this is me, like here's why I don't agree with this. Maybe it's also a little bit of a fire starter there for them, but something where they immediately want to click share and then either support it or go against it. So the sharing is a big piece, but for anybody that's active on LinkedIn, regardless of what customers you're looking for, the comments do matter there, because people are way more engaged and involved and willing to give their professional opinions on a wide variety of topics. So that one's not necessarily the share, it's more of people that are validating you through engagements on LinkedIn. And I think data for your emails, it's harder because just everybody handles this a little bit differently, but I think that the average open rate for marketing emails in the country is something like 16, 17%. The average in real estate is between like 20 and 24%.
Are you talking cold or are you talking current customer?
Really both. Especially B2B, current customers are about the same because we all have so much email that's coming through, but it can still be a really great place to be putting out content for folks. You just have to figure out how to cut through the noise. But the more important piece is, what are you doing with the people that are engaging with your email? So it's one thing to say, like, we've got a list of 1,000 people and we have a 50% open rate, which means 500 people at a time are opening your email. That's great. Are they doing anything with it? Click-through rates, which means somebody that's clicking on anything in your email, average for most emails in the country between like 1 and 3%. And then real estate's more like 2 to 4%. It just kind of depends on the topic. So it's really low. So then you think about that, like 2 to 4% of 500 people. If that's what they're clicking on, then what are you doing with them afterwards? How do you send them additional messages? How do you customize what you're doing? Like, if they're clicking on things, maybe you should lean in more to what they care about. If they are clicking on things whenever you offer up podcast links, or you're offering up videos, but they don't click on things for articles and stuff like that, that's stuff to pay attention to that can inform your other content. I think the only other data piece that I would mention is, for a lot of companies where, like, you've got leadership at the top saying we should be talking about XYZ, Google Trends is an amazing tool for you. And so if you go to trends.google.com, you can see what's trending nationally on certain phrases and terms, but you can also see what's trending by state. So for me, it's not always the place to go for new ideas. Sometimes it's if we're trying to convince leadership that, hey, nobody actually cares about this. You think we should be talking about XYZ, but literally throughout the state of Texas or Florida or Pennsylvania or the Carolinas, or wherever you may be, nobody's searching for it, and we can prove it through data. That can help sometimes to say, like, look, we want to do things that people care about. And so you can put it in searches. Like, we do a trends email to our team every week, and we search real estate, housing, and real estate closing, because people don't talk about title insurance. They're not searching it all that often, surprisingly to everyone on here, I know. But so we search those just to see, like, what are the top searches each time, because some weeks people are searching more about price. Some weeks they're searching more about how the process works. Some weeks it's more about what's finding somebody near them that can do that type of work or whatever. And then that can inform the type of blog post. So if we see that they're searching more about price, maybe we need to talk about price this time. If they're searching more about process, we can do that. If they're searching more about jobs, we can talk about, culture and how it is to work here and all that kind of stuff. And trends.google.com can be really helpful to you in that way for your content all the way around, not just for your website content. So that was a long answer on data, but I wanted to kind of cover a few different things there for them.
We could do a whole thing on data on just on data on one platform. I mean, LinkedIn's got an algorithm. Everything's got an algorithm. That's like another big boogeyman word, is algorithm. What's the algorithm doing? But should I share my screen and then we can get into some of the practical stuff?
Sure.
Cool. Share the screen. Which one am I doing here? Cool. You got my screen?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So I look at title insurance on, I got Google Trends up here, but I look at, you search title insurance on YouTube, and you can filter this stuff by, is this dashboard in the middle of the screen now too, or is that just, do you still see only YouTube?
Just YouTube.
Okay, gotcha. You filter by these upload dates here, and just let's do title insurance filtered by this month. And honestly, you're going to get like 80 to 90% of what is title insurance and why do you need it. That's reflective of the search volume for title insurance, because coming from Alta from the top down, we need to do a better job of explaining title in a simple, compelling way. So a lot of people are creating content around that. Google Trends, if you want to do, I gotta get this dashboard out of my way here. You search your title insurance in where it says trends.google.com. Give you an idea of there we go, play the Jeopardy theme song. Yeah, so the related topics, the waiver program. Yeah, we can get into there's so many research tools. You can get into more robust custom keyword search tools, but I mean, Google will tell you what people, finish the sentence feature that you search title insurance, and here's what it'll show you. Here's what people are searching for. Title insurance 101, training, agent policy, all this stuff. Click these links, check out what people are producing content on, make your best judgment on. I guess if you can do it better. I mean, Wayne, how often do you search for something? You're like, I could do that better. Does it happen a lot?
Exactly. Or like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Here's how I can run with it from my perspective, or how I can customize it for my sake.
Yeah. So getting into how to search for some content pillars. Where do we got? What do we got here? Is this it? Where? It's like walking a tightrope there. So this is a search that I did in, if you've never done use ChatGPT, you can get a free account. But what content topics about title insurance have the most engagement on LinkedIn? And this is where we're going to start our strategy. We're going to type this in, copy and paste it in, and press create. And it's going to give us a list of topics. So we have educational content, industry trends, case studies and success stories. This is where your tangibility and social proof is going to come in. It's something that we didn't talk about, Wayne, that we could, another hour is social proof and how important that is. So here's where you can start. It's going to give you this foundation of information. And from here, what we're going to do, I don't know if I want to do this whole thing, but maybe just this first sentence here. Create the optimal LinkedIn calendar for a title insurance underwriter whose ideal prospect is an independent title insurance agent or title insurance attorney. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type this into ChatGPT. Use these topics to create the calendar. I'm just going to copy and paste the previous prompt or previous response. It'll let me. And then we're going to go again here. And here's, don't copy and paste verbatim out of any AI program, but it's great for ideation. It's great for getting started. And for every International Chess Day post, a better idea will spawn out of something, as long as you have a reference point. So 1 month, or month one, foundation education. I don't need to read this off like a middle school book report here, but you can see where you can get going with this and get started. And then the important part is that it gives you a set schedule for some consistency with these topics, and it eliminates some of the Scooby-Doo legs where you're spinning in place wondering what to do. Everyone's set recurring meetings on your Outlook calendar. Create a separate calendar for either your social media or title it marketing content or whatever, and set this, create a new calendar and have each day be set to whatever you end up creating. If you would like help creating something like this, let us know. We'll circle back offline.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wayne, should we do something? Should we create something in Canva here? Because
Yeah.
I'm looking at, create a post or an article explaining what title insurance is and why it's necessary. Why don't we do that? Do you want to just do what title insurance is? Maybe we can even use ChatGPT again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Figure that out. Okay, so in what's the word count on a post, Wayne? Is it 10 words, 20 words? Do you have a preference or?
Yeah, we try to keep it under, for title, it's more of like under 30 is fair for a lot of these guys.
And we're talking, I'm talking about words that are going on the actual picture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, less than 10.
Okay. 10 words or less. Explain why title insurance is valuable. Good luck, ChatGPT. Okay, sure. I guess, start here. Take this sentence, and then we're gonna copy it. Let's pop into Canva. And then if you haven't messed with Canva before, they have a cool feature, and this might be for the premium, I'm not sure, but you can load your company's colors in here to the exact hex code and your fonts and your logos and stuff, and any photos and logos. I mean, it's like $12 a month. And if you have you're here on this call trying to figure out how to do this better, it's an advantage to have this stuff at your fingertips for what, 12 or 13 bucks a month.
Yeah, they're going to actually be increasing it next year. I think late next year, quite considerably. So you want to be grandfathered in at this pricing. So if you can find $120 in your annual budget, it's definitely worth it. If you even use Canva once a quarter, I think it's worth it.
Sure. And then, I mean, words and pictures together, it's kind of a no-brainer at this point. But here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a design. I have these templates set for, but let's just start from scratch here. Okay, so we have our text. Property protects property ownership against past claims and hidden legal issues. So templates here, use what you want. Let's see. Let's do real estate. I mean, you have so many options, and even though I use Adobe for a lot of our stuff, I still come back to Canva and see layout examples and see what. Let's see. There you go. We got a house. Go in here. Delete out the stuff you don't want. And our fonts. For work. So we have knock the bold off. And then we can add another text box here.
And this is helpful, especially if you're in a smaller market or you're a one-man band. This is super helpful for just creating something on the fly and realizing that you're not Steven Spielberg. Nobody expects you to have like Pulitzer winning pieces that are going out, especially in the immediate term. So that's why this is helpful to show for folks.
Sure. And then it's a minor graphic design tip is that don't put dark colored text on top of a dark background. Use contrast properly. White text is pretty safe to do in any situation. Let's see, make that more even. How's that look? There we go. Nice and even.
Yeah.
A tip with the spacing and I try to have the connected words not spill over into the next line. But that's just me. And then you get into here, our colors are, your color palette sits right here. I don't know if that's too bright, but have fun with colors. But I don't know why it's doing this big blocky thing here. But anyway, that's about it. And you put,
whatever your contact preferred method is, and
run
from there. You've got something that didn't take tons of time, and that if you're not,
was that 5 minutes?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it's not going to set the world on fire. It's not going to be the most interesting thing ever, but there's you do the prep. You do the work on talking to the people that take the calls and answer the questions from your customers, and you're able to create something a bit more compelling. But I mean, this isn't wrong. It's not factually incorrect. And if you're putting something out that has your logo on it, and some of the more significant stuff can be your blog articles, your white papers. This isn't the perfect graphic, but it's better than posting like International Ice Cream Day, because it's it's topical. Yeah, that's about it. I don't know how much time I spent on each graphic, but do we have any questions? Any specific questions that someone is looking to? Let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Now's the time for questions. If you want to ask Wayne a question that we haven't covered, please do it now. And yeah, Wayne, do you have any thoughts on branding or imagery or any of those types of trends as we're heading into the new year?
I would say that especially if you're just now starting to think about some of this, I would figure out what your guidelines are as an organization. That's something that a lot of folks don't think about. And if you've got multiple people creating things for you, whether that's graphics or even just written content, like what as an organization do you always want to say and what do you never want to say? Like knowing some of those edges can be really important in terms of thinking about content and making it, again, less of a headache for you. So be thinking about that stuff a little bit, because that can be a challenge that you don't anticipate. And again, if you're trying to figure out like, where do I start with some of this, or where do we grow? Figure out where your customers are at, talk to them, see what, again, like that list I talked about of the brokerages or the individual agents or the investors or whomever that you want to get business from. Where are they active? Where are they posting? Where do they get information from? Because then that's where you should be, because you want to be influencing them from there.
Great. Well, like I said, we could talk multiple more hours about all of these topics individually, but hopefully everyone on the call has gotten a couple new tools in their belt. And if your headcount's strapped, if someone has anointed you the head of your company's social media page, or you're responsible for writing blogs or an email newsletter or anything that seems really daunting, use some of the things that we talked about today at the foundational level to gather information that matters, feature your people, and make sure that your imaging is consistent. You know, talking about the data and power of, you know, consistent branding. If Bowe Digital put out red instead of green, there would be some problems. So
Right.
any additional questions, reach out to Wayne, reach out to me, we'll get them answered. And then you know, I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this in the very beginning, but talked about Gary V, we talked about some of these personalities out there. What's a good nugget of information that you've gotten from somebody like Gary V or a marketing influencer that you're going to take into 2025?
Oh, I think my favorite one in general for people that kind of get lost in the weeds in this stuff is from he's an author. His name is John Acuff, and he talks a lot about how let me make sure I get it right here in my brain because I didn't have this in my head. The quote that I love from him is that uh, perfectionism is a poison disguised as a vitamin. And I love that because sometimes you can spend so much time looking at that blinking cursor and what you should say, or looking at that Canva page and thinking about how can I make this better, that you miss the opportunity to say it or to post it. And so I think don't let that perfectionism be a poison to what you're doing in the name of taking the vitamin and that it should be perfect. That's probably my favorite one that I love and that I will be using into next year for sure. What
Yeah,
about you? Do you have one, Drew?
well, I think back to we had our 70th anniversary back in 22, and I didn't want to. We had 63 followers on our LinkedIn page for a 70-year-old company. I was like, holy crap. The big thing was getting going and like kind of just giving yourself some grace in a retrospective way, and start gathering information and just getting going and figuring out what works, and not trying to get too far out of your lane. And in terms of a person, I'm going to end this call without like a real strong opinion, but there is a book that, let's see if I wasn't planning on pulling it out, but I'm going to scroll through this book and maybe, there we go. So this Megan Hernandez from Alta recommended that I read this book called Epic Content Marketing. And thank you for Megan if you ever watch this video. But the secret in this book says, your customers don't care about you, your products, or your services. They care about themselves. Before you go further in this book, you must accept this truth as the first step. So it's like a really like morbid thing to think about, but it's kind of freeing in some ways too,
Yeah.
where you have to go figure out your own path, and everybody's got great advice. If I could give the advice that I would give is to go find out who is creating really interesting content and start gathering bits and pieces from as many people as possible. And then more importantly, figure out who you don't like, because there are going to be customers that are not right for you. There are going to be people that are just not a good fit for what you do, and being okay with that, as long as your messaging speaks to someone. and
Yep.
your company's mission and history has made a difference for someone and anyone. Just go do that. Figure it out.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Anyway, that's what I got, man. I really appreciate the time, and hope we can do it again soon, and look forward to any of your speaking engagements that get posted in the social space.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciated this, and like Drew said, if there's anything else we can do in the future to help, we're more than happy to.
Yeah. Follow us on our social pages. There's a short survey that will pop up when you close your window. Would appreciate any feedback. And Wayne's been doing this for a long while. He's the expert. Give him a call if you need anything, please. But Wayne, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody.
See you.